Ancient Viking gold discovery. Man finds 1,000-year-old Viking gold treasure during a simple forest walk in Denmark. A quiet walk through a forest in northern Denmark turned into one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in recent history. What began as a normal day outdoors quickly became a movement that stunned historians, archaeologists, and Viking experts across Europe. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer of this story on our AI
I want
podcast.
you to imagine just for a second that you're out for a peaceful walk. It's April 22nd. You're in northern Denmark, specifically walking through this really beautiful, dense forest area near Rold in Himmerland.
Sounds like a pretty ideal afternoon, honestly.
Hey, just a totally normal day. You're taking a stroll along a quiet woodland track, listening to the wind in the trees, maybe just watching the ground as you navigate the uneven terrain. And then you notice something, just a tiny glint, like a flash of yellow shining through the dark soil. So you stop, you crouch down and brush away a handful of dirt.
Yeah.
And suddenly the shape of a heavy braided ring emerges. In that exact moment, you realize you are holding a physical piece of history right there in your hands.
I mean, that is literally the ultimate archaeological fantasy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The idea that the ancient past is just, resting right beneath our feet, just waiting for someone to take a closer look on a regular afternoon walk. It completely reshapes how we view the mundane landscapes around us.
It really does. And this wasn't just like an old coin or a fragment of discarded pottery. Today, we are doing a deep dive into what archaeologists are now officially calling the Rold treasure.
Yes, a massive discovery.
Monumental. It was just reported on May 6, 2026. We are talking about Denmark's third largest Viking gold hoard ever found.
Which is saying something considering Denmark's history.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to examine this incredibly rare, pristine collection of gold and really understand why it completely changes our view of the ancient Viking elite.
Right, because it really does.
Because this specific find completely breaks the rules of what we thought we knew about how the highest tiers of that society handled their wealth.
Yeah, the standard narrative we usually hold about the Vikings, it usually centers around, raiding long ships, and a very, rugged utilitarian existence.
Function over form.
Exactly. We imagine a culture prioritizing survival and function. But this newly discovered gold tells a totally different story. It speaks to a level of artistry and, concentrated wealth and strict social hierarchy that is incredibly sophisticated.
Like rivaling any major European court of the era.
Without a doubt.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way this discovery unfolded is just wild to me. Our finder is walking in the forest, he sees the shine in the dirt, and he pulls out not one, but two heavy gold rings.
Yeah, two of them right off the bat.
And he realizes immediately, this is something of immense historical value. So he hands them over to the museums of North Jutland, and then the professionals arrive at the location.
Right, they bring out the metal detectors, set up a grid, and start conducting a methodical sweep of the surrounding forest floor.
And what did they find?
The museum team uncovered 4 more gold rings hidden nearby. So we're looking at a total of 6 perfectly preserved gold arm rings, and together they weigh an astonishing 762.5 grams.
Which is nearly 1.7 pounds of solid gold, just sitting there in the soil.
It's staggering.
But the weight isn't actually the thing that has historians marveling at this find. The condition of the rings is what makes this unprecedented. I mean, the source we're looking at quotes Torben Sorau.
Right, the archaeologist and cultural heritage manager at the museum.
Yeah, and he flat out calls this a completely unique find. He says, and I quote, "We have simply not experienced anything like it before here at the museum. All 6 rings are completely intact."
And that pristine condition is a massive anomaly.
Wait, really? Why is that so unusual?
Well, finding Viking-era treasures without a scratch on them is just extraordinarily rare. Almost every single time we uncover a Viking hoard, the metal is severely chopped up.
Ah, okay. We need to look at how the Viking economy actually functioned to understand why intact gold is so weird. Because they didn't have a standardized minted currency system like we do today, right?
No, not at all. Typical Viking transactions relied on what historians call hack silver.
Hack silver, literally hacked up.
Exactly. They would take silver objects, so coins from the Middle East, bracelets from England, brooches, whatever they had on hand, and they would physically chop them into pieces with an axe or a heavy knife.
Just absolutely destroy the jewelry.
Right, and then they would weigh those irregular chunks on a small, portable scale to pay for things.
Yeah.
It was a purely weight-based economy.
So the original shape or the artistic value of the silver meant absolutely nothing in the marketplace?
Zero. Only the raw mass mattered. And furthermore, they would often do this thing called pecking the silver.
Pecking. Like a bird.
Sort of. They would take a knife and gouge small cuts into the metal to ensure it was solid silver all the way through and not just, lead coated in a thin layer of precious metal.
Oh, because counterfeiting was a real concern even back then.
Oh, absolutely. So almost all silver we find is chopped and pecked.
So using hack silver is basically like carrying around a massive jar of loose, chopped up change to buy your everyday groceries. Like you need to buy a chicken or a bundle of wool. You hand over 3 mangled chunks of a hacked up silver bracelet.
That's a perfect way to picture it, yeah.
But these gold rings from the rolled treasure, they have no axe marks. They have no pecks. They had never been cut, damaged, or tested for purity.
Not once.
So carrying these intact gold rings wouldn't be like lugging around a jar of loose change. It would be like walking around the village with a pristine, uncut sheet of $10,000 bills.
Yes.
You do not use that to buy a loaf of bread or a fishing boat. Gold was not meant for ordinary trade.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the immediate social implication of that untouched gold. Because the rings lack those telltale marks of commerce, it tells us definitively that they were never meant to enter the marketplace.
Wow.
Like Saurabh pointed out, gold in the Viking Age was hoarded by the absolute elite of society. We are dealing with the 1% of the 1% here. This wasn't currency. This was a manifestation of raw power.
That completely shifts the narrative from economics to politics. If you aren't using this gold to buy goods, you're using it to project authority. You wear it to guarantee loyalty.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the era these rings were forged.
Right. The experts date the rolled treasure to somewhere between 900 and 1000 CE. And this isn't just any random century in Danish history, is it?
Not at all. This is the exact era when Denmark was actively transitioning from a scattered collection of rival chiefdoms into a unified, centralized nation.
King Harald Bluetooth's era.
Yes. He is the towering figure of this exact period. He aggressively consolidated his power across both Denmark and Norway. And around 965 CE, he erected the Jelling Stone.
That's the massive runestone, right?
Yeah, beautifully carved. Historians often refer to it as Denmark's birth certificate because it's the monument where Harald officially claims to have unified the Danes and made them Christian.
So the rolled treasure dates directly to this period of intense, often violent political centralization.
It does. It's a time of extreme nation building.
And when you're trying to hold together a fragile new kingdom, you have to clearly show everyone who is in charge. You need to reward the warlords who support you.
And you do that by gifting them 762.5 grams of master-crafted gold to wear on their arm.
Right. And the craftsmanship on these rings is just staggering. It's high art. I was reading through the descriptions from the archaeological report, and we are not looking at simple melted lumps of gold poured into a basic mold.
No. The physical artistry here reveals a mastery of metallurgy that is rarely credited to Viking smiths. 3 of the bracelets are formed from intricately twisted gold rods, creating this beautiful braided effect.
It's just gorgeous.
And another features highly delicate inlaid wire ending in a decorative knob-shaped clasp. Then you have others crafted from thick, solid rods of gold, finished with tightly wrapped closures that we call running knots.
Okay, I actually want to pause on those running knots because that detail is mind-blowing when you think about the physics of it.
It really is.
Because gold is a relatively soft metal, right? But when you work it, when you hammer it or twist it, it undergoes a process called work hardening.
Right, the crystalline structure of the metal literally binds up.
Exactly, making it brittle. So if you just take a thick rod of cold gold and try to force it into a tight knot, it will literally snap in half.
Yeah, to tie a running knot in thick metal, the smith had to constantly anneal the gold.
Anneal it.
Right. That means heating the metal in a forge to a very specific temperature to relax its internal structure, letting it cool, bending it just a little bit, and then heating it again.
Over and over.
Over and over.
Right.
It is an incredibly tedious, labor-intensive process requiring an intimate understanding of thermodynamics. A single mistake, heating it too much or bending it too far while it's cold, ruins the entire piece.
And then there is the standout piece of the hoard. One of these bracelets has ends that were flattened out, joined together, and then decorated with highly advanced zigzag patterns and triangular stamps.
It's the stamped piece.
And creating those stamps means the goldsmith also had to be a master of hardening iron, right? Because you need specialized hardened iron tools to punch those tiny, perfect geometric shapes into the gold without dulling the stamp itself.
Exactly. Researchers confirm jewelry like this would have been created by master goldsmiths working exclusively in centralized workshops for royal patrons. You do not just happen upon a master goldsmith with the infrastructure to heat, anneal, and stamp pure gold.
You have to employ them.
You employ them.
Yeah.
You control their output. The person wearing these rings was walking around with a museum's worth of art on their wrists, signaling a direct, tangible connection to the royal court. Perhaps even to Harold Bluetooth's inner circle itself.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. I have to push back on the logic of this entire situation.
Okay, go for it.
If these pieces were crafted by absolute master goldsmiths using highly advanced metallurgical techniques, specifically for top-tier nobles,
Right.
if they are the ultimate status symbol designed to show everyone how powerful and connected you are, why on earth would someone leave them in the dirt of a Himmerland forest?
Yeah. That is the central mystery of the royal treasure. Why abandon the ultimate symbol of your power?
It makes no sense.
Well, to understand that, we have to look closely at the physical evidence of the site itself. The layout of the hoard gives us a critical clue, because the source highlights that these 6 rings were not just tossed into a single hole or left in a forgotten satchel.
Right.
They were spread across nearly 15 meters of forest ground.
15 meters. That is almost 50 feet of distance between the first ring and the last.
Exactly. That wide spatial distribution proves to archaeologists that the burial was highly intentional. This was not an accidental drop while riding a horse. Someone walked that specific stretch of ground and deliberately deposited these heavy gold rings across that entire space.
So if the burial is intentional, we have to figure out the motive. And the archaeological report mentions 2 main theories here.
Right.
The first theory makes a lot of sense when you consider the political reality of Harold Bluetooth's era. Like we said, consolidating power is never a peaceful process.
Very true.
The late Viking Age was exceptionally bloody. It was filled with violent struggles for control of the Danish throne, shifting alliances, sudden betrayals. So this theory suggests the gold was buried during a period of severe political unrest.
Yeah, wealthy individuals, the very people who had massive targets on their backs during these power struggles, they would frantically hide their most valuable assets when an enemy clan or a rival army approached.
And the intention, of course, was to survive the conflict, come back to the forest, and dig up the wealth.
But many of them never returned. They were killed in battle, assassinated, or forced into permanent exile. So the treasure simply became a victim of the very violence it was hidden from, left in the ground because the only person who knew its location was dead.
Man. So that's the political unrest theory. It's like frantically burying a safe in your backyard while a violent home invasion is happening down the street. It's driven purely by panic and a desperate need to preserve your wealth for tomorrow.
Right.
But the second theory the researchers put forward is entirely different. It's a spiritual explanation.
Yes. In Viking Scandinavia, precious objects were frequently buried as deliberate ritual offerings. These deposits were deeply tied to the Norse religion.
Like giving thanks to the gods.
Exactly. They were made to secure favor from the gods, to give thanks for a victory, or to spiritually anchor a powerful family to a sacred piece of the landscape.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture... Wait, I think you actually have a good point on this.
Well, yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Torben Sarau explains that when heavy, pristine rings like this are laid down together, archaeologists almost always interpret it through one of these two extremes.
Right.
It's either a pragmatic deposit to secure valuables in troubled times, or it's a profound, permanent ritual sacrifice. In the ritual scenario, there was zero intention of ever recovering the gold. The act of giving it away to the earth was the entire point.
I am so fascinated by the psychological difference between those two scenarios. I mean, they're completely opposing human experiences, right? But they result in the exact same archaeological footprint.
Yes, exactly.
But let me ask you about that footprint. Does the 15-meter spread actually give us a hint as to which theory is more likely? Because to me, if you are terrified and you're running for your life from a rival Viking clan, you are not taking the time to methodically pace out 15 meters and dig 6 different holes.
That's a fair point.
Doesn't that widespread suggest the deliberate, careful pacing of a sacred ritual rather than the frantic scattering of someone fleeing for their life, like dropping coins into a wishing well?
It's a compelling argument. A ritual deposit absolutely aligns with methodical spacing. A sacred landscape often requires highly specific placements. We know from other sites that ritual offerings might involve burying an object at the base of a significant ancient tree, placing another near a prominent boulder, and maybe aligning them along a specific sightline.
So the 15-meter spread feels very choreographed.
It does. However, we cannot entirely discount the pragmatic theory. A noble fleeing for their life might intentionally spread the treasure out to ensure that if a pursuing enemy found one disturbed patch of soil and uncovered a ring.
Oh, they would assume they found the whole hoard and just stop looking.
Exactly.
Wow, that is a brilliant point. It's basic risk diversification, like burying your money in 6 different banks. Even if the enemy clan finds one hiding spot, you still have 5 more rings waiting for you when you eventually return from exile?
Precisely. But the haunting reality of the rolled treasure, regardless of the initial motive, is the final outcome. Whether it was driven by sheer panic or deep religious piety, the owner walked away from that forest and never, ever returned.
Yeah.
For over a millennium, that master-crafted gold sat in the dark, silent soil, while empires rose and fell, and the entire world changed above it.
Until a modern person taking a woodland walk on April 22nd saw a little glint of yellow. A 1,000-year-old mystery just resurfaces. And it triggers a very specific modern protocol. Because a fortune in ancient gold suddenly coming out of the ground leads to the question of who actually owns it today.
Right, the legal side of things. And to put the historical scale of this into context, we are dealing with a critical piece of national heritage here. I mean, only 2 Viking gold discoveries in all of Denmark's recorded history are larger than the rolled treasure.
Only 2?
Yeah. The first is the famous Tis ring, which was discovered in West Zealand back in 1977. And the second is the massive fested Hoard, which was uncovered near Rebay in 2016.
So the moment those 6 rings were pulled from the dirt in Himmerland, they became one of the most important historical finds in the country.
Absolutely.
And because it's so historically significant, it falls under a fascinating Danish law called Danif.
Yes, the concept of Date is brilliant. The word historically translates to something close to property of the dead.
Which is very poetic.
It really is. Under this centuries-old legal framework, objects found in the earth that are considered historically priceless are immediately declared the property of the state.
But the finder isn't just left empty-handed, right?
Oh no, the goal isn't to punish the person who found it. In fact, the finder is heavily compensated with a tax-free reward based on the object's historical value and its material weight.
Okay, so it's a win-win.
Exactly. The true purpose of Danif is to prevent amateur archaeologists from quietly selling irreplaceable artifacts on the black market. It guarantees that these incredible pieces of history are protected, preserved, and made available for public study. And the rolled treasure rings have already officially received this Danif designation.
So they no longer belong to the dirt, and they don't belong to a private collector. They belong to the history of Denmark. The source notes that researchers from the National Museum of Denmark are currently analyzing the Hoard. Like they're trying to extract every conceivable ounce of data to better understand Viking metallurgy, the fierce politics of Harald Bluetooth's era, and the sheer wealth that defined that transformative century.
And the best part of this whole process is that the artifacts are not just being locked away indefinitely in some dark subterranean vault. The museums of North Jutland have actually announced plans to publicly display the treasure at the Aalborg Historical Museum.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, anyone will be able to walk through those doors and stand mere inches away from these incredibly heavy braided gold rings, viewing them in the very same region where they were secretly buried over 1,000 years ago.
So what does this all mean? Why does a deep dive into 6 pieces of 1,000-year-old gold matter to you right now as you go about your day?
It's a great question.
I think it serves as a profound, grounding reminder that history isn't just an abstract concept trapped in the pages of an academic textbook. History is a physical, tangible thing. It is quite literally beneath our feet.
It really is.
We walk over the forgotten stories, the triumphs, and the panics of thousands of ancient lives every single day. And sometimes it just takes an ordinary person on a quiet woodland stroll to brush away a handful of dirt and bring that forgotten history rushing back into the light.
The rolled treasure connects us directly to the messy, complicated humanity of the past. I mean, when you look at those advanced zigzag stamps and the physics-defying running knots in that thick gold, You aren't just looking at precious metal. You are looking at the fierce ambition of an ancient king trying to hold a violent country together.
Yeah.
You're looking at the intense, sweaty labor of a master artisan working over a hot forge, and you are looking at the deep, unresolved secret of the person who left it all behind.
That is exactly the image I want to leave you with today. I want you to step into the shoes of that ancient owner. Just imagine you're the one holding 762.5 grams of elite Viking gold in your hands. You are standing alone in that Himmerland forest 1,000 years ago.
Just you and the trees.
Whether you were terrified, running for your life, and burying your wealth so your political enemies cannot steal it, or whether you are in a state of deep, quiet reverence, making an unimaginable spiritual sacrifice to the Norse gods. What was going through your mind as you dropped the final heavy ring into the earth, threw that last handful of forest soil over the gold, turned your back, and walked away from your fortune forever?
Okay, one question for you. What do you think was the real reason these Viking gold rings were buried in the forest over 1,000 years ago? Was it feared during a violent power struggle, or could it truly have been a part of a mysterious Viking ritual? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.